Good morning. It's Monday in Manhattan. We're starting a little late this morning, but today Jason and I are going to be going over our the 0.3% sales tax initiative that's going to be on the ballot in November. We've been going out to a lot of local groups presenting a PowerPoint just to give people an understanding of the sales tax initiative, the projects that are going to be occurring if it passes, how we want to fund these things, why we're going about this sales tax initiative in the first place. So what we're going to do is we're going to transfer from the camera actually to our webinar feature so we can show you guys the PowerPoint and you can really see the slides that we're showing the public. And then of course, if you have questions, go ahead and ask them in the comments section and we'd be happy to answer any of those.
So as Jared mentioned, we're on the general election November 5th on the ballot. I think advanced voting will start October 16th, I believe. So if you haven't registered to vote, please do so. And if you don't plan on voting, I hope you do after this presentation. We obviously have a local city election. We have a USD 383 school board election and a sales tax question on the ballot for November. So our background, we're going to cover a little bit. We're going to get into significant projects. We're going to look at the comparison of sales tax and property tax and why we're proposing a permanent sales tax, and then the timeline. So our background involves studies that we've completed through the community. We started in 2004 looking at the levee. The levee is really the trail system on the southeast part of the community that you ride your bike on or you may jog or walk on, but it protects us from the Kansas River and the Blue River. We're talking about raising that by 3 feet. 2009 MBAF was announced. We started a North Campus Corridor Master Plan in 2014 to try to take advantage of some of the growth opportunities that will come because of MBAF. Jet service to Dallas and Chicago in 2009. We started that service, and in a matter of roughly 10 years, we've seen employments rise annually. We're over 70,000 in 2018. Aggieville Community Vision Plan started in 2015. Community Development Department engaged with the community and started asking questions, doing surveys, receiving a lot of positive feedback towards redevelopment and revitalization efforts for Aggieville. And the Douglas Rec Center is an initiative we embarked on when we started talking about our middle school recreation centers. We wanted a facility to be geographically located within the community to serve those in the southern part of the community, as well as referencing back to just some of the challenges we have today at our existing Douglas Center.
So Jason kind of gave you an overview of how we got to where we are today, and now these 6 major projects that we need to invest in pretty much over the next 7 years is the plan, with raising the levee, redeveloping Aggieville, reconstructing the runway at the airport. One of the things we didn't mention in the last slide was our joint maintenance, city maintenance facility of all of our operations crews in the cities. In total, all those projects, they cost about $175 million to do all those constructions and see those through. We have, leveraged and secured about $106 million of that total from grants and outside revenues. This is federal money that we're receiving, state funds. So we're looking at about a $69 million gap. And that's where we came up with, okay, how do we fund that gap so that we can see all these projects through and complete them in their full capacity? And that's where we came up with, the 0.3% sales tax initiative.
As we mentioned, the levee is a major initiative. It's about $33 million. The levee was constructed in 1963. What you're seeing on the video is a breach of the levee and just how quickly water infiltrates our old industrial park area, the downtown, Highway 24, and the retail and the commercial corridor along there. There's overwhelming support from the community we know of. for flood mitigation. And this 3-foot rise will help protect our water supply and our wastewater treatment plant as well, that obviously serves the entire community. We got a federal grant of just under $20 million, so our local share will just be over $13.4 million.
And this is one of the 6 projects, Jason, that we are actually committed to funding. We've entered into that agreement with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to come up with that $13.4 million of a local match. So that's one of the areas that we think the sales tax, can cover that, as opposed to other sources like property taxes or raises in utility fees. I couldn't remember if you mentioned it, Jason, but that levy, it protects about $1.4 billion in just public and private infrastructure. That's not just including our water and wastewater facilities. That's all the private development that's there. About 7,600 residents live in that area that could be inundated, if a breach were to occur on the levy. So this is a very high priority project for us. Aggieville Community Vision. You've probably seen a lot of the videos that we've put out, the surveys that we've done over the last 3 to 4 years to really gauge the interest of the public on what vision they want to see for Aggieville when it comes to more development, streetscape, landscape improvements. Parking is a big issue. We're in the process of designing the parking garage just south of Rally House right now to really free up some of that area so that we can expand those streets. Again, in the 2019 community survey, overwhelming support to redevelop Aggieville with those streetscape and parking garage improvements. 75% of the respondents were in favor of that. We have estimates of about a $30 million, infrastructure investment in that area. We just recently passed or approved the tax increment financing district. So again, as developments occur in Aggieville, as a good example, the hotel that's going to be built, off of Bluemont, that's going to increase the valuation in the district, and then we're going to capitalize that property tax revenue over time to help invest in some of these projects, and that's going to generate about $15 million. So we're looking at, again, another $15 million, give or take, to come up for the sales tax to cover that.
North Campus Corridor, we provided you a video. It's kind of a fly-through of the Kimball Avenue, Denison Avenue, College Avenue, and North Manhattan Avenue corridors. We, as I mentioned before, MBAF became a reality in 2009. Still under construction today. Won't be open probably until about 2022, 2023. But in 2014, we started putting together a master plan. We have 13 phases of construction that we would have proposed and have shown options for within this video. $43 million budget to construct phases 6 through 13. We have dedicated funding sources coming in from city university funds, which are the sales tax that are generated on campus and through athletics. We have $4.2 million from KDOT and $3 million directly from K-State Athletics as a contribution towards projects adjacent to their property. The $10 million in city university is a dedication of $500,000 in that fund over the next 20 years. So that can assist with annual payments throughout that 20-year period. So you can see we have about 17.2 committed. We've got a $26 million gap. We anticipate other state and federal grants as opportunities, but we will have a local share. If you just look at the curb-to-curb improvements, the lane widening and the intersection enhancements for the North Campus Corridor, phases 6 through 13, the local share, the local price tag for a curb-to-curb would just be $20 million alone. So the improvements behind the curb that involve the sidewalks, the lighting, some of the entry features are all part of that budget above that $20 million, so around $23 million. So we feel like we've got a good amount of money coming from the university athletics and state of Kansas to assist with a lot of those improvements behind the back of the curb.
Manhattan Regional Airport, we're looking at a runway and taxiway reconstruction. Fortunately, we're getting about 90% of that funding, which right now we have estimates around $50 million. And 90% of that is coming from the federal government to help pay for that. So we have to come up with the other 10. as we mentioned earlier, Jason discussed, just the growth of the number of employments, the daily flights to Dallas and Chicago without reconstructing the runway. Airlines won't fly out of our airport if we have an inadequate, runway and taxiway. So we're in the design process of that. It's a lot of concrete, but we're working with the federal government to do these studies, get the design done so that we can reconstruct the runway. But that is a big portion of the growth that we've been seeing in the community. And we want to, the Manhattan Regional Airport is a great asset that we have. So we want to continue to see that thrive.
Douglas Rec Center, I mentioned earlier, just a geographically based recreation center for the community. We have a high need for indoor recreation that has come out of multiple studies we've conducted in the last 5 to 7 years. This is a $4.5 million construction project. It's a 17,000 square foot facility, primarily gymnasium space to facilitate basketball, volleyball, pickleball. There's a walking track, a multi-purpose room, and a fitness space. Our existing Douglas Center is a little bit short on space. Our gymnasium in there is not a regulation-sized court. This will give the Douglas Center additional programming space and add to the inventory to help meet the community needs for recreation.
The last of the 6 projects, again, is that city maintenance facility. This is, right now we have 4 different facilities spread across the city when it comes with our street and fleet crews, water and wastewater distribution, and then our park maintenance, which is parks, forestry, horticulture. All of them are spread across 4 different facilities that were built between the 1920s and 60s for the most part, and are very inadequate. We just don't have enough room right now for our current staff, and it's just very poor conditions. So over time, we've discussed and started, preliminary design of a process to create a joint city maintenance facility for all of our operations staff, about a $12 million total cost. We've actually looked at existing revenues from our utility revenues, as well as special parks and recreation funds and some special street and highway funds to come up to fund most of the construction. We're looking at about $1 million gap. So out of the big picture, this is one of the small pieces that we're trying to come in with the 0.3 sales tax initiative to help get us, to the finish line on this project to have enough money.
And this slide just kind of summarizes the key points for all 6 projects. I'll give you the freedom to read these. They're reiterated based on what we've provided you in this briefing. Current sales tax rate in Manhattan, Kansas is 8.95%. 6.5 of that goes to the state of Kansas. And then between the county and the city, we each have 1 full percent, an additional 0.2 for the city for streets, which will expire in 2027, and an additional 0.25 for the city for park and rec quality of life, which will expire in 2028. The full cent for the city, which is our general purpose, is the permanent. That is the categorical sales tax we're talking about increasing from 1% to 1.3%. So that'll take our total from 8.95% to 9.25%. Currently, our 1 cent generates about $11 million annually. If we go to 1.3, that'll generate roughly $14 million annually. So we'll capture that $3 million increase and dedicate it over the next 30 years towards this $175 million worth of projects and infrastructure.
And that 1%, Jason, of that general purpose city sales tax that funds operations, those were passed by the voters in 1972, a half cent, and then again in 1980. So really, we've been working with that 1% for almost 40 years now, and kind of living off that growth over time. But it's getting to the point where we need to come up with this extra source of revenue to fund these projects, because currently we need that existing $11 million to fund our city operations, to fund all of the things and services that citizens have come accustomed to.
Yeah, that tax itself is fed the organization very well. We've reached the point of growth has just kind of flattened out. So we've been looking to property taxes and other resources as our sales tax have been flat for the last 4 or 5 years. Currently, we rank 17th, 18th in first-class cities. As a first-class city, we can bring that sales tax rate up to 2%. So going from 1% to 1.3 is within the statutory requirements of that sales tax. By increasing the 0.3, we go to 9.25, and here we become in the 9-10 ranking of the top 25 first-class cities in Kansas.
Pull factor is a great, I guess, reason of why we're looking towards sales tax to help fund these projects with the 0.3% sales tax. Pull factor, for those that don't know, is the money, the sales tax revenues that we generate annually that come from people who don't live in our community. And that's over 25%, which is a very high number compared to a lot of other cities in Kansas, which is why actually you see a lot of cities in Kansas and similar boats that us are relying more heavily on their sales tax. But we're fortunate to have a lot of visitors come into the community who are going to actually spend dollars, at our restaurants, at our hotels, and then they're going to help actually pay for a lot of these projects that we're talking about.
So this is a financing plan for the next 30 years, and it shows what the principal is, and it also gives you a column to look at the principal and interest. And we show this to draw attention to, obviously, you need more than just the principal. It's like buying your home for $150,000 to $300,000. Clearly, you're going to go debt service that in most circumstances for 20 or 30 years. And if you add in all the interest over that 20 or 30 year period, clearly you've paid more than your purchase price. So this is what we're doing here with the debt. We're showing you what it'll cost out of the gate to go ahead and purchase and construct these improvements. But then we're also factoring in that 20 to 30 year debt service on some of these projects and showing the community those totals.
And this is, again, Jason, one of the reasons a lot of people ask why we don't go for that 10-year special sales tax like we did with the street maintenance or the Parks and Rec quality of life sales tax that recently passed. It's because these are long-term efforts that we're going to be funding over the next 20 to 30 years as we pay for these projects and then start paying the debt off them over time.
Yeah, if we approach the community with a 0.3 10-year sunset, we'd be placing that question back on the ballot in 10 years with the projects really out the door. And if the voters said, we're not interested in renewing this, the governing body and the administration would have to find that revenue source, more than likely in property taxes, in order to fund that bond and interest payment for that remaining schedule.
This is just a quick breakdown. In these next few slides, we're just going to try and paint the picture of what a 0.3% increase in sales tax look like. This is just a breakdown of just general goods, groceries, TV that you would buy, that you're going to pay sales tax on, what you're going to pay currently right now at that current 8.95% sales tax rate, and then how much more you would pay in the event the voters approved the sales tax in November. This is another breakdown of just from a more household perspective. General rule of thumb is, annually a household is going to pay around 30% of its income on taxable goods. So what we did was we broke down just general, segments of household incomes, how much they may spend on taxable goods in a given year, and then what the annual difference is. We also break that down with property taxes. As we mentioned earlier, in order to fund that $69 million gap, $125 million gap from principal and interest over the next 30 years, next year we're going to need about $3.3 million annually. And that's what the sales tax would generate. As a comparison, we would raise the property taxes about 6 mils to get that $3.3 million. So we have a breakdown here of residential homes, what their assessed valuation is, and what you would pay in property taxes, as well as if you own a commercial business.
Something you can do on your own is look at the value of your home or your business and flip back between that and your income. And you can look at, if you make $100,000 between you and your spouse as a household income, and you may occupy a home that is $175,000 in value. You can look and see what it'll cost you from a property tax standpoint, increasing on a $175,000 home, $121 in this example, and you can flip back to the previous slide and see what a $100,000 home is expected to increase from a sales tax increase. And we pointed this out on numerous occasions, and you can see there's less of an impact on the sales tax side. And a lot of that goes back to what Jared was pointing out in terms of the 1.33 pull factor that we have generates 25% of our billion in sales comes from people who don't live here. So it spreads it out more towards our visitors versus on the property tax side, it will all stay local.
This recording afterwards will be available, of course, on our Facebook page. These tables are also on our website. It's cityofmhk.com/sales tax. And that is the full overview of the sales tax initiative. And it does go into these details and has these tables here.
So scenarios for the future, if the 0.3 passes, we'll commit these revenues to offset the property tax and the bond and interest fund for those 6 projects summarized. If it doesn't pass, we more than likely are going to be moving forward with a lot of those 6 projects. As we stated earlier, some of those are we're under contract and under legal obligations to go ahead and do. So we would issue property tax increases in scenario A to fund a large portion of that debt. We may also issue GO bonds to have a property tax increase to support a portion of those 6. So that would be debated really at the governing body level with the city commission to see which projects are more of a priority or not. There is option C where we may forego or not do the 6 projects. And again, there's that exception with a levy since we already have that formal agreement. And some of the consequences at the airport would be dire in terms of possibly losing, well, you would lose American Airlines service to Chicago and Dallas. Not doing or funding our portion of Aggieville or North Campus Corridor could be a detriment to our economic development strategies locally that we've developed over the last 5 years. So yeah, it's not to say those options couldn't happen, but those are the 3 scenarios that the governing body and city administration would be wrestling with moving forward.
This is just the sales tax question that is going to be on the ballot, so you can read it over. This is what it's going to look like. As you can see, it's pretty brief. It goes, into the detail of increasing that general sales tax, that 1% that we're talking about, by 0.3%. It doesn't go into the specifics of the 6 projects. That was actually covered separately by our governing body. So in May, they passed our city commission passed a resolution saying, okay, put this on the ballot and ask the public. They have passed a separate resolution that says if this sales tax passes, we're going to spend the money as a priority on those 6 projects that we discussed. And again, because it's a permanent sales tax, we can't necessarily bind ourselves to specifics like you can with those 10-year sales tax we were talking about, like the street sales tax and the quality of life. Timeline again, last day to register to vote is the 15th of October, and then advance voting begins on the 16th. And then, of course, election day is on November 5th. So again, this is on our City of Manhattan website, cityofmhk.com/sales tax. Vivian, we may have got some questions. So I will get out of the PowerPoint here and we can answer any of those.
I think we addressed this, but one question about North Campus Corridor was, are bike lanes included in the North Campus plan?
We've included sidewalks up to 10 feet in width, and we anticipated trying to have our bicyclists stay on those shared use paths on either side of Kimball, north and south. We are addressing College on the east side of College from Dickens north to Kimball. North Manhattan has a very large pathway today. We'll maintain that pathway from Claflin to North Manhattan, along North Manhattan to Kimball. And then Denison will extend the sidewalks on the north and south side of Kimball from Denison to North Manhattan as well. So we have accommodated the bicyclists. It'll be on that shared use path. A new sidewalk was also constructed from Kimball north to Marlette along Denison that also has a 10-foot shared use path as well. That'll tie back into Marlette Avenue, pedestrian connections there at Highway 24 as well.
This question is from Royce. He asked, why can't you cut funding for some of the park projects to work on infrastructure?
So we have to get into some of the park projects specifically. Are we thinking about things that are occurring at Seco, at Annenberg? Some of our quality of life initiatives, the 0.25, are dedicated by that vote to those two recreation centers at Eisenhower and Anthony. And then we have another portion of that sales tax that will go towards Seco Park. So by vote, those resources have to go to those projects, that 0.25 quality of life initiative. We can't redirect those funds to other places in the community.
Can you talk about how some of these infrastructure projects might benefit students?
So the Aggieville and North Campus corridor, both directly adjacent to campus and within their living areas.
Yeah, Aggieville's a big project where we do have a lot of students that go in there. With the streetscape, landscaping improvements, as well as the parking garage to allow that density. Really, the vision behind that is, of course, to keep Morrow kind of the way it is from a building perspective, and then see some denser development surrounding Morrow Street. And that's more businesses, that's more jobs. So we're really hoping to capitalize on that, so Aggieville can grow into becoming a more, urban, innovative environment where students can work. And that is hoping that we can retain and attract more students to come to K-State, Manhattan Christian College, Manhattan Area Technical College, to live in that district. North Campus Corridor is another example where with NBAF coming in, you've seen a lot of the work that the K-State Foundation is doing with their business park. So again, we're trying to bring in, more jobs to the community so that students can actually choose to stay and work in Manhattan upon graduation, for sure.
The pedestrian level amenities in both North Campus Corridor and in Aggieville are as significant as the roadway improvements. We're putting as much money into those pedestrian areas to make them safer and more accommodating in both Aggieville and North Campus Corridor as we are in the roadways themselves and the infrastructure from curb to curb. So there's a lot of attention to detail, a lot of improvements, and again, from a safety perspective and an ease of use, our attention is there for both North Campus and Aggieville.
I think that's all the questions we had, Vivian. So if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to contact Jason or I. And again, all the information about the sales tax is going to be on our website, cityofmhk.com/sales tax. Over the next few Monday in Manhattans leading up to the election, we're going to kind of dive into each one of these 6 projects in a little bit more detail. We kind of covered them briefly, and I think we kind of went over our normal amount of time this morning, but we're going to go into some detail so we can really get into the specifics of the projects so folks can have an understanding of what this investment really means. But with that, again, let us know if you have any questions, and have a great week. Thanks.